Hello! Today, we will talk about a very important topic, creating the illusion of volume in drawing. This is the foundation of everything. If you want an object in your drawing to look alive and convincing, not just lying flat on the paper, but existing in space, you must be able to convey volume. It doesn't matter whether you are drawing a portrait, a hand, a cup, or an apple. The principle is the same. We perceive volume through light and shadow. That is exactly what this lesson will be about. Beginners often produce drawings that look flat or childlike. This is not because they drew badly, but because they failed to convey volume. Even a simple circle, when we add light and shadow, turns into a sphere, and a square into a cube. This creates the sense of form and space. Every object in light has 5 main zones. Light, where light falls directly. Halftone, the transition between light and shadow. Shadow, including cast and core shadows, where light does not reach. Reflected light, light that bounces back inside the shadow. It's very important to understand. Reflected light is not a random highlight, but part of the modeling of volume. It helps to show that the object exists in space. Highlight, the brightest point. I want to show on simple geometric figures how to achieve this three-dimensional effect. We'll begin with shading a sphere, because on a sphere, all 5 elements, light, shadow, halftone, reflected light, and highlight, are clearly visible. Pay attention to how I shade. It is very important to shade along the form of the figure, not randomly. If we shade along the form, the drawing becomes more realistic and photographic, which is especially important when we move on to drawing a portrait. Notice also that I don't try to make the shaded areas dark right away. I gradually build up tone in layers. This is the best approach, because if you immediately draw very dark, it will be much harder to correct. Then you would have to work with an eraser or a kneaded eraser, which can dirty your drawing. It's better to start with light tones and gradually build them up. Also, while shading the sphere, I switched pencils from hard to soft. I started with a 2H pencil, then moved to HB, then softer ones like 2B, 4B, and 6B. The 6B is the softest, and with it, I achieved the exact tone I needed.
Когда мы с вами
When we
приступим
start
к
drawing the
рисованию
actual portrait,
портрета, вы увидите, что
you'll see that building up shadow works
тени
exactly
будут
the same way
именно таким же образом, как я
as
сейчас
I showed with the
показывал
sphere.
на примере шара. То есть лицо и портрет
The
человека,
human face, if you break it
если
down,
разобраться немножко в построении,
also
то
consists of
также
simple
он
geometric
состоит
forms.
из этих простейших геометрических фигур.
As
С
strange
одной
as it
стороны,
may
мы
sound,
видим сначала, например, глаза,
the eyes are essentially spheres.
шара, также части лица,
Parts of the
как,
face, like
щеки,
cheeks,
подбородок,
chin,
лоб
forehead,
в местах тоже
also
имеют
have rounded forms.
и набор тона
The
и
way we
цветов
build up tone and shade is nearly the same as with the sphere.
Да, естественно,
Of course, we'll be working in a photorealistic technique,
фотореализма и некоторые
so many parts of the
части
face
лица в большинстве своем мы будем
will be smoothed
складывать,
and blended.
расфасовывать. Сейчас
What you see now is academic cross-hatching as taught in art schools.
но мы будем стараться,
But we will try to bring our drawing
наша фотография, точнее наш рисунок был
as close to a photograph as possible.
похож на фотографию. Поэтому, чтобы
That's
добиться
why, to achieve smoother
более
transitions,
плавного эффекта перехода, мы будем где-то
we will blend some
расфасовывать,
areas so the transition between light and
переход
shadow
между светом и тенью
is as
будет,
soft as possible.
максимально плавным. Обратите внимание, что
Notice that I left the highlight untouched,
у нас блик, и я не
a
трогал
clean
его,
white
оставил
spot,
лист, потому что это самая светлая
because it is the
часть
brightest
рисунка,
part of the object.
самая светлая часть предмета. Также я сильно
I
не
also did not shade over the
часть
reflected light too much.
есть отражение на предмете. Поэтому, когда мы будем
That's
прорисовывать
why, when drawing
части,
details
как
like
глаза,
eyes or lips,
на нашем портрете или губы, где у нас будет
we will also
мы будем
leave those
оставлять
parts of the
эти
paper
части
clean
нетронутыми, мы будем оставлять чистую бумагу, и таким образом
to
у нас
create the
получится
effect of
добиться
volume.
объемного эффекта.
Conveying volume rests on three foundations.
Можно так выразиться.
First, form.
Форма. Сейчас я вам покажу
Let me show you
три
three shapes:
фигуры. Это три разные формы, то есть
a
шар,
sphere,
дальше у нас
a
будет
cube,
куб, и в конце я
and a cylinder.
То есть
We
мы
must
должны понимать,
always
что мы
understand
рисуем
what we are drawing,
шар,
whether it is a
цилиндр,
sphere, a cylinder, a prism, and so on.
также
The
и
same
портрет.
applies to portraits.
Когда мы передаем
When we
образ
draw a
образа,
spherical object like an eye,
глаза, мы должны это
we
показывать
must use corresponding shading.
штриховкой.
The second
Дальше
foundation
второе
is the light
источник
source.
света. То есть нам
We
нужно
need to know
понимать,
where
куда
the light comes
идет
from,
свет, какие у нас
which
части
parts are lit and
где
which are in
светят
shadow.
и, в тени.
In this
Дальше
video,
на
I will
видео я
show on a
покажу на
portrait where such
портретах
areas are
всё,
located:
где
the
какие
highlights,
части
the shadows, and the midtones.
и так далее. Ну и
The
третье
third
это
foundation is tone. Tone is the lightness and darkness of areas.
Так, собственно говоря, сейчас мы
As you
видим,
see now,
когда говорят,
we
что
build tone by layering strokes on top of each other,
накладываем слои штрихов
making the
друг
area
на друга,
darker.
и тем самым мы набираем тон, то есть мы делаем участок темнее. Еще раз повторюсь, что
Once again, the hatching should follow the form.
это по форме фигуры. Если
If strokes are random or go against the form,
и против формы,
the object
тогда
will look
фигура
flat.
получится плоской. Теперь я приступаю
Now
к
I move on to
рисованию
drawing a
куба.
cube. The
Он
cube teaches us to see planes.
Я
I
рисую
draw it in light perspective so it looks three-dimensional.
У него есть
It has three visible
черные
sides.
грани, и свет у нас падает
The left side is lit,
на левую грань, так что она будет
the
самая
top side is
светлая,
darker,
а верхняя грань будет
and the
потемнее,
right
и
side is in
правая
shadow,
находится в тени,
making it
это
the
будет
darkest.
самая темная часть.
I shade each side separately, changing the stroke direction so the planes are easier to distinguish. Here, it's not about smoothness like with the sphere, but about contrast. Planes are like the planes of the head, cheeks, forehead, and nose, built on such transitions. I don't go too deep into construction, so you can clearly see how ordinary geometric shapes, in this case a cube, can be made three-dimensional with just a simple pencil. We don't even need color to convey volume. Unlike the sphere, the cube has no highlight, since highlights appear only on glossy or wet surfaces. But you can see that both the sphere and cube have reflected light. In the cube, the reflected light is in the bottom right corner of the shadowed side. Here, I use a kneaded eraser to slightly lighten the area, creating the reflected light. On the cube, it appears in the lower corner, which helps make the cube appear more three-dimensional. I then draw the cube's cast shadow, angular, just like the cube itself. Now let's draw a cylinder. The cylinder combines features of both the sphere and cube. I draw an ellipse on top, two vertical sides, and a curved line at the bottom. That gives us a cylinder. In portraits, cylindrical forms will be the nose and lips. The difference will be in lighting. In portraits, the middle plane is often lit. I drew all three shapes with pencils of different hardness. If we used only one pencil, we wouldn't achieve such tonal depth. Softer pencils allow darker, richer shadows, while harder pencils are better for lighter areas. For example, use 2H or H for light areas, and 2B, 4B, or 6B for shadowed areas. The darker the shadow, the softer the pencil. The light source is on the right, so the middle area of the cylinder falls into core shadow, while the left side has reflected light. Again, notice that I shade following the curve of the form, not just with vertical strokes. This emphasizes the roundness of the cylinder. Then I add reflected light on the left side, a soft, bright area within the shadow. This is light bouncing back from the surface. Such details make a drawing look alive. A key point about reflected light, it is always darker than light or halftone areas. Now I add the cylinder's cast shadow, and the drawing is complete. Try practicing these shapes, or simply observe objects in your home that resemble them. Try setting up a light source and study how objects cast shadows, where the highlights fall, where the halftones are. This will help you better understand how volume is conveyed. Now let's see how this applies to our portrait. The right side of the face is lit. The left side is in shadow. Where the shadow transitions smoothly into light, that's where the halftone is. We also see shadows in the hair on both sides and under the chin. Highlights appear in the eyes, on the earring, and a bit on the lips. Reflected light is visible on the chin and a little on the left side of the nose. So today you learned what volume in drawing is and how to convey it correctly. In the next lesson, I will show the different types of hatching, what problems may occur, and how to avoid them. Goodbye!